Hey everybody, another replay on the ocean map, this time in the Izumo again. I'm actually quite enjoying this ship. Obviously I've already got the Yamato unlocked, but I've been playing this just because it's a bit odd, and I don't know, I kind of enjoy odd, as evidenced by the fact I like the Archer in tanks. Now one thing that is interesting about this ship is just the sheer amount of deck space it has. The 16-inch triple turrets aren't actually that big, especially compared to Yamato's 18-inch triple turrets, and so they look kind of odd on such a massive battleship, particularly with the actual barbettes for the turrets being larger in diameter than the turrets are. The layout's really curious too, with the anti-aircraft guns being focused around the edges of the deck instead of centralized around the superstructure like you would see on a lot of ships. It's just a really bizarre looking thing. Also worth note, it has the same kind of fire director that the Nagato and the Amagi both have, which is the kind that rolls around a donut-shaped track around the upper part of the superstructure, which is kind of bizarre. I assume it would automatically account for the inherent parallax error in reading range, considering it's moving around a central point, not actually just on a simple pivot like most battleships' fire directors are, but it's a very curious design. I've heard one potential reason for the fact it was designed like that was just to try and limit the amount of movement from the ship swaying in rough seas, but it just seems kind of odd. It certainly looks bizarre. Although the other two battleships on my team are heading south along the west side of the map, along the 2-line, and a lot of the team following, I have 3 cruisers with me and a destroyer's screening, and we've also got some decent air cover, so I feel fairly confident in pushing across the sea line towards the east. I get some early good hits into that second Cleveland, the one in the distance, wiping out about half his health in a single broadside. Because the 3 turrets are so close together, it does mean you get very good concentrated fire at long ranges. Compared to a conventional battleship layout, you have a lot less spread in your shots to contend with, and it does make the Izumo quite good for long-range sniping. To what extent you can call this sniping anyway. It seems like the enemy have mostly deployed to head towards the east side of the map, but they're keeping their distance. Most of the ships that are actually within range are cruisers, which I'm not too worried about at the moment. Since the change in the armor mechanics, their AP isn't really a problem for me unless they get very, very close, and their HE, although it could potentially set a shit ton of fires and make my life very miserable, is not so likely to hit in any kind of concentration at this range. Pubbies have been really struggling with their shot placement ever since the 0.3.1 patch, because it broke the aiming mod. And without the aiming mod, it appears that probably 80 to 90% of this game's players don't actually know how to click in front of a ship. They click on it instead, which is not the way to go when you have flight times between 10 and 20 seconds. I single out the already crippled Cleveland for punishment. A few shots go in, mostly not from me. I make a turn here to get some more distance between myself and the bulk of the enemy battleships, also to give a worse angle to them. Cleveland goes down to one of our own cruisers, and so I shift to the other one. Now that third Cleveland has turned around and run, as he well should. He's lost a huge chunk of his hit points already, and he is trying to put as much distance between himself and us as possible. Smart man.
Reporting the position of a priority
Or woman, who knows. This Cleveland is in a very bad place. Some more good hits there. No citadels, but a lot of hit point damage. Sometimes, if you get a good broadside into somebody, and the shells actually do explode in structure, you won't need citadel hits because you'll be doing about the same amount of damage. It's down to 148 hit points, and in a Cleveland there is no way to repair those. The next hit he takes will almost certainly kill him. And there he goes.
We've destroyed an enemy cruiser.
The enemy Pensacola is not quite sure what to do here. It looks like he's trying to make a turn and then changed his mind about it. And he ends up having a close encounter with the blue line. Meanwhile, the enemy Colorado is well within my range and is also moving in a very predictable fashion. The two battleships immediately south of me are moving towards me at an angle, which is one of the hardest shots to make in this game. And so, given the chance at the relatively easy to hit Colorado, I will take it. The biggest problem I've encountered, and you can see that Miyoko here thought it'd be a clever idea to turn in front of me. The biggest problem I've encountered so far with engaging American battleships is I lead them too much because I'm used to fighting Japanese battleships, which comparatively are faster in the lower and mid tiers. It isn't until the higher tiers, when you get into the North Carolina, the Iowa, and the Montana, where the Americans actually gain any kind of speed. In fact, all the way up to tier 7, which is where the Colorado sits, the American battleships mostly top out at 20 or 21 knots, making them slower than Warspite. Finally, the Miyoko pulls away from me. I was very strongly considering team killing him there, but thankfully for both of us, I didn't. And with him now out of my way, I decide to shift my fire onto this Fuso.
Scout launched.
What the Fuso lacks in gun caliber, with only 14-inch guns, it makes up for in number. It has 12 of them in 6 double turrets. It also has an incredibly high range for a tier 6 battleship, because of its floating Jenga tower of a pagoda mast, with the fire director obviously sitting at the very top of it. However, the Fuso has a very bad day as some of my 16-inch shells find him. New Orleans takes a bit of a risk here cutting in front of me, but gets away with it as I begin to turn anyway. And another citadel hit there on that Fuso. Now, an interesting point to note, in live gameplay you can't see the turrets and rigging and so on blocking your shot. The reason it's doing this is because the actual aiming camera in replays is not the same as the one in a live match. I'm not sure why, but you don't get the sort of vignetting effect around the outside of the screen. You also don't get the occlusion of the ship you're in. It also is missing the little lead markers, which are absolutely critical in judging how much you need to aim in front of somebody to actually hit them. Which is a shame, because if it had those in, you'd be able to see exactly where I'm leading certain ships at certain ranges, and it might help your gunnery. Either way, I turn a little too late and have a close encounter with the blue line myself, but thankfully I'm already changing course, and so it's not too big of a problem. This Fuso's just about had it, and our team has successfully bottled up the remainder of the enemy in the southeast corner, quite literally in a box.
Enemy battleship foundered.
Down goes the Fuso. I'm now more or less on my own over here. I do still have one cruiser in support, but with so many of my teammates pushing in from the southwest corner of the map, I'm not too worried. the enemy are going to have their attention split between myself and the other battleships, and so it's not too much of a problem. Just got to figure out who's looking where, and try and evade the shells that are coming my way. I do take some hits there, coming from the other Fuso, from quite long range. See a chance at this Pensacola, and I take it. No hits there, unfortunately. It looks like the salvo straddled him. So I put out the remainder of my broadside and wait to see what happens. I do get one hit, not for very much damage though. Down goes an enemy scout plane, and somebody is firing HE at me as I get set on fire. My attention now shifts to the Nagato, who is the heaviest gunned battleship left on the enemy team. Just like me, he has 6-inch guns. Oh, sorry, 16-inch guns. Oof, bit of a difference there. The Fuso is only 14 inches. The New York, I think, is also 14 inches. So I'm not too worried about them. The other trump card the Nagato has is a spectacular secondary battery. Similarly, the Fuso has a lot of secondary guns as well. If you let these mid-tier Japanese battleships get close to you, they will fuck you up. However, the Nagato is now caught between myself and my teammates, and appears unable to decide who to shoot at. Put some more fire on him before the enemy New York gets my attention by firing at me. This guy's still at full health. My first salvo is pretty much on the money, but the spread kind of fucked me up there. My next 6 shells find his citadel.
Penetration.
Well, at least one of them does. 3 hits, 1 citadel. In a very short amount of time, he has lost about a third of his health. Get another big hit in there. I'm now actually within secondary gun range of him, having the skill and upgrade that allows me to extend my secondary range quite considerably. And so, as my secondary guns engage him outside of his own secondary range, I continue firing with my main battery as well. Just the one hit there, not a very big one, but it's keeping the pressure on him, and he is now getting fired on by all my teammates. But oh dear, it seems an incoming salvo from probably the Nagato just wiped out 2 of my turrets. And I go down to fire from the Fuso, of all things, who is still at full health. Or at least was still at full health. I do lose my ship here, but I've already had a pretty good game, so I wasn't too upset with that, and it looks very likely that my team's going to be able to pull a win out of this. We've got the remaining enemy ships on the run, bottled up in one corner of the map, and on a fairly low amount of hit points. The Fuso is the only one who's really going to take any amount of time to knock down. Spectating my teammates here, you can see I actually have got my Rising Suns working again. I just don't think that the IJN ships look complete without them. And for those who don't actually know, the Rising Sun is still used as Japan's naval ensign to this day, which I could only imagine antagonizes the Chinese and Koreans no end. The enemy Nagato is about to go down. One good salvo should finish him. And there it goes. Just the Fuso and the Megami left. They're not going to last very long. Although a well-played battleship can tank a ridiculous amount of incoming fire, when you're this badly outnumbered and you've been sort of forced into a corner of the map, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do. Particularly in a tier 6, fighting against tier 7s and 8s. And in the case where I was still alive, at least a tier 9. Not quite sure why our Nagato's barreling face first towards these guys when he could turn to the right and unmask all his guns. I get the impression he's trying to get within secondary range, which is not necessarily a bad idea, but he probably just could have finished both of these guys quicker if he'd kept his whole broadside ready. He does make a turn now though. Sure enough, he's about to be in secondary range of the Fuso. And there we go. A wall of fire comes out of his ship as all his primary and secondary guns fire. It's just the Mogami now, and he doesn't have much chance against this. You can see the 3 squadrons of dive bombers headed in his general direction. Dive bombers are ridiculously powerful now, not in a bad way actually. And so they're actually worth using. Before they did little more than tickle battleships, and it required very, very good aim to do anything to a destroyer. Now they're much more useful, whereas torpedo bombers have been nerfed somewhat, which I think was deserved. Mogami's not long for this world, and any moment now he is going to be on the bottom with his teammates.